The old Chevy groaned as we took a sharp turn onto a desolate moonlit road. The plan was simple: a late-night road trip, no destination in mind, just a tank full of gas and the thrill of the unknown. My buddy in the passenger seat had a knack for urban legends, and tonight he was rambling about one, the Shadow Rider. "It's just a stupid story," I laughed nervously, gripping the wheel tighter. "Some drifter that supposedly appears on empty highways? Please." "Yeah," he muttered, staring out into the pitch-black woods. "Until you see him." The road stretched on endlessly, flanked by towering trees. The headlights barely cut through the inky darkness. A thin fog began to creep along the ground, thickening with each mile. The GPS glitched out a few miles back, but we didn't care. This was part of the adventure. Then we saw the sign, Route 13. It was riddled with bullet holes and slanted at an unnatural angle, barely hanging onto a rusted pole. Beneath it, spray-painted in bright red letters, "Turn back." "What do you think?" I asked, half joking. "Should we listen?" My buddy smirked. "You kidding? This is where the fun begins." So, we pressed on. Big mistake. The fog thickened, swallowing the road behind us. It wasn't long before the Chevy's radio crackled, a burst of static that quickly dissolved into a low hum. My buddy fiddled with the dial, but all he got was snippets of eerie whispers, soft, fragmented words that didn't quite make sense. "What's that noise?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Old radio interference," I lied, though the hair on my neck was standing on end. Suddenly, something darted across the road, a flash of shadow too fast to fully see. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching as the car skidded to a halt. Heart pounding, I scanned the road ahead. "Did you see that?" I asked. My buddy nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, but what the hell was it?" We sat there for a moment, the silence pressing down like a weight. Then came the sound, a faint rhythmic click, like boots on asphalt. It came from somewhere behind us. "Who'd be out here?" he whispered, craning his neck to look. "Stay in the car," I hissed, though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or myself. The clicking grew louder, closer. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see, well, anything. But there was nothing, just the empty road, shrouded in fog. And then it stopped. "Drive," he said, voice tight. I didn't need convincing. The Chevy roared back to life, its old engine protesting as I slammed the accelerator. We tore down the road, the fog seeming to coil and twist in our wake. Then the headlights caught something. Standing in the middle of the road was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally thin, draped in what looked like a tattered hooded coat. But the most unsettling part? No face. Just a blank expanse where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been. I swerved instinctively, the car veering dangerously close to the ditch. When I looked back, the figure was gone. "You saw that, right?" I stammered, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. "Yeah," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keep driving." But the road had other plans. No matter how far we went, the scenery stayed the same. Thick forest, dense fog, and the faint glow of the moon. My phone was dead, and the Chevy's clock had frozen at 1:13 a.m. "We're not getting out of here," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Don't say that," I shot back. "It's just a weird stretch of road." That's when we heard it. The faint sound of an engine, but not ours. It was deep, guttural, and gaining on us. I glanced in the mirror and felt my stomach drop. There in the distance were headlights, two dim yellow orbs bobbing like the eyes of some predatory beast. "Who the hell is that?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Doesn't matter," I replied, slamming the gas pedal. The Chevy lurched forward, but so did the other car. Its headlights grew brighter, its engine louder. I pushed the old car to its limits, the speedometer needle trembling as it climbed. And then, the lights disappeared. "Where'd it go?" he asked, turning in his seat to look out the back window. "I don't know," I admitted, heart hammering in my chest. That's when the Chevy died. The engine sputtered, coughed, and gave out completely. The headlights flickered once before plunging us into total darkness. "Great," he muttered. "Now what?" But before I could answer, the world around us changed. The fog receded, the forest vanished, and the road stretched on into a void, a black, endless abyss. And then we saw him. Standing in the middle of the road was the same faceless figure, but this time it was closer. Too close. Its head tilted slightly, as if studying us. My buddy screamed, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The figure raised one hand, pointing directly at me. The Chevy's radio crackled to life, blasting an ear-splitting static that morphed into a deep, guttural laugh. And then, just as suddenly as it had all started, it was over. I woke up in a ditch, the morning sun blinding me. The Chevy was a smoking wreck a few feet away. My buddy was gone. To this day, I don't know what happened on Route 13, but every so often, late at night, I hear the faint sound of boots on asphalt and wonder if it's coming for me next. Weeks passed after that night on Route 13, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faceless figure, heard the guttural laugh, and felt the weight of its outstretched finger as if it had marked me. My buddy never turned up. He was listed as a missing person, but I knew better. Whatever had taken him wasn't something you could file a report on. I tried to move on, but the signs wouldn't let me. It started small, static bursts on the radio when I drove, always around 1:13 a.m. shadows in the corner of my eye that disappeared when I turned to look. My phone would glitch, the screen flashing Route 13 in bright, distorted letters, though I'd long deleted the GPS app. I began waking up at night, drenched in sweat, with the faint sound of boots echoing through the stillness of my room. Then, 2 nights ago, it got worse. I was driving home from a late shift when my headlights flickered, just for a second. The road ahead was empty, dark, but something felt off. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The headlights were back, dim, yellow, and too familiar. "No," I whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. "Not again." I pressed the gas, trying to outrun them. But no matter how fast I drove, they stayed the same distance behind me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, the screen flashing erratically. Against my better judgment, I grabbed it. The screen wasn't showing my home screen anymore. It was a video of me. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. It showed me, driving, just as I was now. My own panicked face stared back at me, illuminated by the dashboard lights. Then slowly, the camera panned to the back seat. Something was there. A figure, draped in shadow, motionless but unmistakably real. Its blank face turned toward the camera, and though it had no eyes, I could feel it staring directly into me. I dropped the phone. When I looked up, the road had changed. It wasn't the familiar stretch of highway anymore. The forest was back, thick and oppressive, pressing in on either side. Fog curled around the car like smoke, and the headlights ahead disappeared. Instead, the figure stood in the middle of the road, waiting. I slammed the brakes, but the car didn't stop. It just slowed, dragging me closer and closer to it. I screamed, jerking the wheel, but the steering locked. The figure raised its hand, pointing again, and I swear I could hear its voice, low, guttural, and echoing in my skull. "You're next." The car came to a stop on its own. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to even breathe. The figure stepped closer, the sound of boots on asphalt, deafening now. It leaned in, its faceless void mere inches from the windshield. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the figure dissolved into smoke, curling into the vents, the cracks in the dashboard, into me. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in my bed. The sun was rising, casting warm light through the blinds. For a brief moment, I thought it had all been a dream, but my hands told a different story. They were raw, covered in tiny cuts, and there were shards of glass embedded in my palms. The Chevy? Gone. My phone? Missing. The only thing left was a folded scrap of paper on my nightstand. On it, in jagged, smeared writing, were 3 words: "Stay off roads." Now, every night, I stay in. I barricade my doors, cover my windows, and keep every light on. But the sound of boots never stops. They circle my house, closer each time. It doesn't matter where you go. The Shadow Rider always finds you. And one day, he'll take me too.